Okay, so what we got here is we're gonna start talking about how to rig faces. So first thing you need to know is there's really only two bones that we're concerned about, or two bone groupings, I should say, for the head that we're concerned about. And again, when we're rigging, we're trying to simulate, create something that can simulate a skeletal / muscle structure. Okay, so your most important bones are going to be, so let me change my brush size down and switch to a more appropriate color. Switch to red. So really, our first bones that we'll ever place are kind of considered part of the body rig, and the first one is going to be, the base of the head joint, and that's right here, right in this location. And then we're going to have our tip of the head joint, and that's only so that we can, well, let me zoom in a little bit. And this one is just so that this joint will orient to it, right? Okay, so I'll undo that one because that one's not going to stay there. Now, once we got this, the head can pivot wherever it needs to go, right? Okay. Then, after that, we have the next most important one is going to be the jaw. Okay, it's real easy to see on a skeleton where it pivots. Right there. Okay, just in front of the ear, that's the ear canal right here. Okay, so it always pivots right in front of the ear canal. Now, it turns out there's actually another bone right here, another part of the jaw. When the jaw comes forward, it can kind of pivot at that location as well. But it's kind of buried down in the skull a little bit further. But we're not going to worry about that. Okay. Now, that's really the only joints in the entire head, right? The only bone connections that we're concerned about as riggers. So what we do a lot of times in rigging is after we place these two joints, then we segregate the head into two different portions. And so we'll have the upper part of the head that is all attached to the skull, and then we have the lower part, which is all attached to the jaw. Okay? And then after that, we create a third group. And the third grouping is a group of influence objects that are connected to both the skull and the jaw. And if you break it down and think about it in those three groups, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble. So anything that belongs to the jaw should move with the jaw joint. Okay? Anything that needs to move with the skull needs to go to a skull joint, but we don't really have one of those. We have a head joint. Okay? Our head joint controls the entire thing. So what we need is another joint at the same location of this jaw. And this duplicate joint is going to control everything on the upper part of the head. And that way we can move the entire head, which moves the skull and the jaw, or we can move just the skull, or we can move just the jaw. Okay? Now, why is that? Why do we need that? Because our skulls don't normally move. Well, it's animation, that's why. If you wanted to do things like, say, a Muppet mouth, and the jaw needs to stay still, but you still want the character to be able to open their mouth, then you have to open it from the top, right? And so we need a mechanism to rotate the skull without rotating the jaw. Okay. Now, it turns out when we're painting weights, so let me switch colors. We'll do this in, I don't know, green, I guess. So when we're painting weights, this head joint is going to control roughly this in the end. This area over here. I should circle it. Okay. This top of the head joint is going to control this area. And there's some overlap. This should fall off up here on this line here. Okay? That way when we do the Muppet head, the Muppet mouth, the face and the front of the head all rotates up, and we actually lose volume a little bit on the skull, on the back of the head. Okay, so this kind of mushes in back here. But typically when we're doing Muppet mouth, it's not really extreme. And I'm teaching you guys, this is cartoon rigging for faces, obviously. You wouldn't want to do this on a real human looking character. You might be able to get away with a little bit of it. Okay, and then our jaw is gonna blend with this, and it's gonna control this area. Okay, so there's our three main areas. So let me undo all those green marks. Okay, now we have two bony masses. We've got a joint that is describing both of those bony masses. And we need to represent all these different muscles in the face. Now this guy's extremely simplified these, but he does show the trajectory of them. And that's the important part. So when we're doing this, what we need a method to describe each of these muscles. And there is one option to do that, and that's like we created tendons on the bird. We can use those. We can use geometry as an influence object, and that geometry can represent these muscles. Okay, but we're going to end up with a lot more bones to control that geometry. So that geometry that controls that is the muscle needs to be controlled by bones, and then that geometry will in the end drive our result mesh. Okay. Now, it turns out that when you're rigging for a feature, especially in cartoon, on a face, that the jaw is going to have bones all the way down it. Just like that. And that's so that, let's say you have a character whose neck is like out here. So they don't really have much of a chin. Well, if you hinge it right here, the jaw, then they're only going to be able to open their mouth like that much. So that character it can't yell, right? Can't open his mouth very wide. Well, if you use all of these bones to open the character's mouth, again, we're dealing with cartoons here, then it can still open its mouth really wide if it needs to. Okay? I'll admit, it can look funny sometimes. And so you have to choose your shots wisely when you use these additional joints. But honestly, if you use all these, and these are all linked, if you were to use all these bones together, then you'd be able to get the mouth pretty wide open, even